She has no idea. It's perfect. That's what I heard through my own bedroom door while holding a bag of medicine for my sick husband. My name is Marissa. I had just stepped away from work to check on Clayton. He'd been recovering from a minor stroke. But what I overheard wasn't a medical conversation. It was a plan. And I was the obstacle. Have you ever heard something so chilling you froze mid-step? Would you confront them right away, or wait and gather every piece of truth? Tell me, what would you have done? They say Asheville is a place for healing. Something about the Blue Ridge air, the winding trails, the quiet hum of trees. But healing only works when the wound isn't still being cut over and over by someone you trust. After Clayton's stroke last fall, I put my private practice on pause. I specialize in mental health support for post-trauma patients, elderly, mostly, sometimes hospice. But this time the patient was my own husband. It wasn't a major stroke. That's what the doctors said, just enough to shake our foundation. Clayton had always been strong, charismatic, ran his own architecture firm, loved craft beer, hated being still. So when his right hand began to tremble and his memory blurred some mornings, something in him collapsed. And I stepped in before he could fall. We moved to a smaller place, a single-story home off Merriman Avenue with forest views and creaky floorboards. I took over the bills, the cooking, the scheduling, helped him relearn basic routines, gave up my clients. That's what love looks like, right? His mother, Evelyn, lived about 30 minutes away in a cedarwood cabin on Montrose Ridge. Independent, intellectual, stubborn. A retired literature professor who still wrote book reviews and gardened barefoot. I started splitting my time 3 days a week with Evelyn, the rest at home. Clayton. He never came. Said the drive hurt his back. Said his mother made him feel guilty for surviving. Then came Brielle Tansey. She was a recommendation from one of his colleagues. Young but sharp, he said. You'll love her. Brielle showed up that first day in white heels and red lipstick. She smelled like grapefruit and gardenia. Said all the right things? Let's get him walking again. We're a team, but her eyes lingered. Too long. I started noticing things. Lipstick stains on the rim of our espresso cup, the one I never used. An unfamiliar cardigan draped over the back of the chair. The faintest sound of laughter through the bathroom door when Clayton said he was showering. Still, I pushed the doubts aside. I was tired, maybe even jealous. Maybe I missed being the one with purpose instead of just the one keeping everything from falling apart. One night, Evelyn called me crying. Said someone had dropped by the cabin unexpectedly that weekend. A woman named Brielle. Sweet girl, she said, brought groceries and flowers, asked about my schedule. I didn't know what shocked me more, that Clayton sent her, or that Evelyn thought they were a couple. I didn't say anything, not yet, because deep down a darker thought had started to form. What if I wasn't paranoid? What if Clayton wasn't just healing, but rebuilding something new without me? I still wanted to believe in us, until I came home one afternoon and heard a voice that wasn't mine saying, "She has no idea. It's perfect." And suddenly I couldn't tell whether the pain in my chest was heartbreak or awakening. The lies never started big. They came in teaspoons. Brielle moved your scarf so it wouldn't fall. I had to take a call. Maybe that's why I missed your message. The mug. Oh, I made tea but forgot to drink it. Harmless things. Domestic. Almost forgettable if they weren't stacking like stones on my chest. One Thursday I came home earlier than usual. Clayton wasn't expecting me. The TV was on volume low. No one in the living room. Then I heard the hum of the dryer and soft humming, a woman's voice, from the laundry room. I froze. Brielle stepped out moments later holding a freshly folded towel. "Oh, hi," she said. "Thought I'd help with the laundry. He was napping, so..." She trailed off, gauging my reaction. I smiled. "You're not paid for laundry." She laughed. "Don't worry, I love organizing things. I'm kind of a freak that way." Clayton appeared seconds later, hair damp, shirt changed. "You're home," he said, voice steady. "I thought you had a client till 5. "Rescheduled," I said, watching his eyes. He never blinked. Later that night, I checked the dryer. Among our usual whites, a peach-colored camisole. Delicate lace. Not mine. I held it in my hands for a long time, the soft fabric almost mocking. The next morning, I waited for Clayton to bring it up. He didn't. Instead, he told me Brielle wouldn't be coming that day. Something about a family emergency. I nodded. Didn't press. But that afternoon, I drove by Brielle's apartment. Yes, I'd looked up her address. Her car wasn't there. That evening, Clayton said he had to step out. Just a walk, to clear my head. He left at 6:42 p.m. I checked. Walked out in gray joggers, earbuds in. By 6:57, a black SUV pulled into our driveway. I watched through the slit in the curtains. Brielle stepped out. No gym bag, no clipboard, just a black leather jacket and wine-red lipstick. I didn't open the door, didn't show my face. I just watched. 20 minutes later, she left. Clayton came home an hour after that. He said the trail had been muddy, and that he felt better. I needed that, he said, wiping sweat that wasn't there. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm sure you did. Saturday came with gray skies and the smell of wet soil. Clayton said he was feeling off, claimed he needed space. He encouraged me gently but firmly to spend the afternoon at Evelyn's. She misses you, he said, sipping orange juice. And I could use a quiet house. I stared at the glass. It wasn't the cup he usually drank from. I nodded, packed a bag, kissed his cheek, let him walk me to the car. Then I drove 1 block, parked under a maple tree, and waited. I didn't know what I was looking for, but something inside me needed proof. Not just clues, not suspicions, words, movement. A moment I could name. At 1:13 p.m., a rideshare car pulled up. She stepped out in fitted jeans and an oversized cardigan, hair in a loose braid, sunglasses. No medical bag, no clipboard. She knocked on the side door, the one only we used. It opened fast. By 1:16 p.m., they were inside. I waited 5 minutes, then unlocked the front door with my copy of the key, slipped in, quiet, careful. The house was dim. A candle burned in the living room, lavender vanilla. Brielle's favorite, apparently. Their voices drifted from the kitchen. I didn't need to get closer. I just stood by the hallway, half shadowed by the coat rack, and listened. She still thinks you're recovering, Brielle said, laughing. You're smoother than I gave you credit for. I've had practice, Clayton replied. They clinked glasses. Poor thing, she said mockingly. She even called me to ask how you were feeling last week. She's sweet, he said. That's her weakness. Brielle's voice dropped. When do we stop playing nice? Clayton sighed. Soon. I just need her calm when I bring up the move. I don't want drama. There was a pause, a shuffle of feet, a kiss. I turned around and left. I didn't slam the door, didn't scream, didn't cry. I drove straight to Evelyn, sat in her garden, and pretended I was okay. But something in me had shifted. They weren't hiding anymore. They were planning. And I wasn't just being replaced. I was being managed. I sat on Evelyn's porch swing for nearly an hour, staring out at the rain pooling along the stone path. She was inside reading. The fire crackled behind her. She had no idea what I'd just heard in my own kitchen, what I'd carried with me like a splinter pressed too deep. I didn't know if I should tell her that her son was lying, that Brielle, the girl who brought her chamomile tea and soft gloves, was playing a role. But how do you shatter a mother's faith in her only child? I walked across the road instead, to Greta's flower shop. The bell above the door chimed like it always had. She looked up from behind a stack of tulips, her expression shifting when she saw my face. You look like you've seen someone die, she said, setting down the shears. Not die, I murmured, just change shape. She didn't ask, just poured me a cup of lemon balm tea and waited. I told her everything, not just what I'd overheard, but what I'd allowed. How I gave up my practice. How I kept defending Clayton. How I convinced myself love meant endurance. That sacrifice was the price of staying. When I finished, Greta didn't speak right away. She reached across the counter and placed her hand gently on mine. Sweetheart, she said, men like Clayton count on women like you, thinking it's your job to carry the whole weight quietly. I swallowed. But Evelyn, she always defended him, I said. Even when he missed holidays. Even when he didn't show up when her pipes burst in January. She defended the boy he used to be, Greta said. The version she still hopes might come back. But that's not who lives in your house right now. I stared into my tea, the steam warming my face. What would you do, I asked. Greta leaned back, eyes soft. I'd protect the one who's worth saving. Silence fell between us, but something had clicked inside me. Clayton had manipulated both of us, me and Evelyn. Told us different versions of the same story. Let Brielle slip between the cracks like she was always meant to be there. And now they were planning next steps. A move, a shift. Which meant it was my turn to plan something too. Something neither of them saw coming. Evelyn opened the door in her usual way, one hand still clutching a novel, glasses sliding halfway down her nose. Back already, she smiled. You must have forgotten something. I had, but not something I could name. We sat in her kitchen, cinnamon tea, old radio humming jazz in the background. She told me about the azaleas blooming late this season, about a memory she'd had of Clayton as a child, how he used to cry when stories ended badly. I listened, really listened, and somewhere between her words I knew she still believed he was that boy, that soft, sweet child who once buried a sparrow in a shoebox and wept for hours. And he had turned that trust into a weapon. Has Brielle been by recently? I asked, pretending to stir my tea. Evelyn nodded. Last Sunday, she brought soup. Clayton had mentioned I'd been low on groceries. Thoughtful of her. The lie stung worse than I'd expected. Do you? Like her? I asked quietly. Evelyn hesitated. I want to. She's kind, polished, but something about her smile, it never reaches her eyes. I looked down at my hands. They didn't tremble anymore. I think we need to talk to a lawyer, I said finally. Evelyn blinked. What for? Because someone's planning to erase us, I whispered. Quietly, legally, like we're liabilities. She didn't ask for proof. She just reached for my hand and held it. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for the woman who still believed in shoebox funerals. And the part of me that had forgotten how it felt to fight back. Whatever came next, I wouldn't be caught off guard again. They had a plan. But now, so did I. The first thing I did was buy a second phone. Not a smartphone, just a basic flip model with a strong built-in recorder. I paid cash, no digital trail. I hid it behind the spice rack in the kitchen, right where their laughter liked to bloom. Right where he once said, "She has no idea. It's perfect." Then I smiled more. I cooked again. I asked how his joints were doing if Brielle had brought the new bomb. I played soft, quiet, sweet, just the way he described me. That Monday, I called a lawyer. Not ours. Not the one Clayton always used when negotiating construction permits or pushing through zoning changes. No, I called Ruth Delaney, sharp, seasoned, and surgically polite. Evelyn had worked with her for years, trusted her more than her own son. When I told Ruth what was happening, she didn't blink. He's grooming her to step in, I said, while quietly trying to edge me out of the house of the marriage, maybe even of Evelyn's care. Ruth didn't offer sympathy, just solutions. Then we make the law move faster than he does. That Friday, Evelyn and I drove to Ruth's office. It smelled of cedar and leather and old paper, the kind of place where nothing frivolous survived. Evelyn, hands shaking slightly, signed every form we placed in front of her. Updated will change of healthcare proxy, power of attorney reassignment. Clayton was removed from all documents. I was added in. He won't like this, Evelyn said quietly, glancing up at me through her glasses. I squeezed her hand. He doesn't get to like it. She nodded. That weekend, I staged my disappearance. Packed a bag. Told Clayton I needed to recharge. Said I'd visit an old friend in Charleston. Even booked a real train ticket to make it look legitimate. Then I drove Evelyn's old Subaru to a friend's unused cabin 30 miles outside town. No cameras, no signal, just trees, wood smoke, and quiet. But at home in the kitchen, the flip phone I'd hidden behind the turmeric and cumin was fully charged. And Liv. It caught everything. At 2:14 p.m. Sunday, Brielle arrived. No uniform, no clipboard, just tight jeans and a slouchy sweater. She greeted him at the door with a kiss. They opened a bottle of wine. He toasted. To clean exits and quiet women. She laughed. You sure she bought the story? She's exhausted, he said. She just wants peace. That's what I'm offering. You're offering her eviction, she smirked. Clayton shrugged. Same thing eventually. I let the phone record 27 minutes of that. Then I turned it off remotely. But I wasn't done. Monday morning, I returned before dawn. The house was still, quiet. I swapped out the first phone for another, tucked this one behind the laundry detergent, just in case. Then I walked into the guest room, the one Brielle used when she worked late. The drawer was cracked open. Inside, her toothbrush, a silk sleep mask, a cheap romance novel with a folded corner. In the closet, my green scarf, the one I thought I lost, and a satin robe I'd never seen before. I took photos, time-stamped everything, sent copies to Ruth's encrypted email. And then I found the final crack. A slip of paper tucked behind the mirror, a checklist in Brielle's handwriting. I call Evelyn Flowers Groceries. Mention assisted care option. Start sleeping over low visibility. Remove Marissa gently. I stared at it until the ink blurred. Then I folded it, slid it into my wallet like a blade. That afternoon, I went back to Evelyn's. She was in the garden, knees in dirt, humming old jazz. He called again, she said, not looking up. Asked if I wanted him to pick up soup or stop by. Tell him yes, I said. Tell him you need help. She looked up, and when he shows up, I smiled, not sweet, not soft. I'll be there too. I told Clayton we should host a dinner. Just something simple, I said. For your mom. She's been feeling distant lately. He looked surprised, suspicious even, but then smoothed it over with a smile. That's a good idea. She'll like that. He didn't ask where I'd been the past weekend. Didn't ask why my eyes stopped looking tired. I cooked. A full table, chicken provençal, roasted potatoes, a rustic pear tart, all Evelyn's favorites. Brielle arrived last, perfume loud, heels louder. She wore a gauzy dress and the confidence of a woman who believed she'd already won. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, quiet, observing. She hadn't said a word to Clayton since signing the new documents. We poured wine, toasted family, laughed politely. Clayton played host. Brielle leaned into his every word. I smiled, refilled glasses. At one point, Clayton leaned in toward Evelyn. Mom, we've been thinking, maybe it's time to consider somewhere more comfortable, a senior living community. You deserve more care. Evelyn didn't blink. Did Marissa suggest this? She asked softly. Clayton chuckled. No, just me. I've been worried about you. And Brielle, Evelyn asked. Has she been worried too? Brielle froze fork midair. I care about your well-being, of course. Do you? Evelyn interrupted. Enough to sneak behind my back and mention it before asking how I feel about it. Clayton's face dropped. Mom, he said carefully, we're just trying to help. Help, she repeated. That's what you call it. I stood, walked to the buffet, picked up a small speaker I had hidden beneath the folded napkins, pressed play. Click, static. Then Clayton's voice. She's exhausted. She just wants peace. That's what I'm offering. Then Brielle's, you're offering her eviction. The silence at the table dropped like a stone in water. Clayton shot up. What the hell is this? Audio, I replied. 27 minutes. There's more. Would you like to hear the part where she calls me removable? Brielle stood too. You recorded us. That's illegal? I smiled. Not in North Carolina. One-party consent. Clayton turned to Evelyn. She manipulated you. She planned this. Evelyn looked at her son. Really looked. I'm not a fool, Clayton, she said. Not anymore. And if I ever was, it ended when you sent this woman to measure my house for future needs. Brielle went pale. Clayton looked at me, fury flashing. You don't win here, he said through clenched teeth. This is my house, my family. No, I said quietly, it was. And you tried to erase us both. I reached into a folder on the sideboard, pulled out notarized copies of Evelyn's new will, the updated healthcare proxy, the time-stamped photos of Brielle's items hidden around the house. Then I added the cherry, a printed transcript of Brielle's medical license complaint from another state. You're not new at this, I said to her. Just sloppy. Clayton pushed his chair back so hard it screeched. This is war. No, Evelyn said flatly. This is consequence. He stormed out without another word. Brielle hesitated, then followed like a shadow. The front door slammed, and in the silence that followed, I finally exhaled. Evelyn lifted her wine glass. To clean exits, she said. We clinked glasses. Only ours. The courthouse smelled like old paper, damp wool, and disinfectant. It wasn't dramatic, but it made you sit up straighter. I was early. Ruth always insisted on it. I wore a dark blazer, no jewelry, hair tied back. Neutral, composed, invisible. I wasn't there to make noise. I was there to end something. Clayton arrived 5 minutes before the hearing. He wore a navy suit and the same smug half-smile I'd seen him use on city inspectors, bank managers, junior architects, who didn't know any better. He didn't look at me, not once. But he greeted Evelyn. Hey, Mom, he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. She turned slightly, let the air absorb the gesture. Behind her glasses, her expression didn't flinch. Not cold, not angry, just absent. He straightened up, and I saw it just for a moment, the flicker of confusion. The quiet panic of a man who knew something had shifted but couldn't name what. Brielle didn't come. His lawyer did. Young, well-dressed, fast-talking. The judge, however, was older, female, sharp. Her robe looked ironed to the millimeter. She opened the case file, adjusted her glasses, and said, "Let's begin." Clayton's attorney spoke first. Your Honor, my client contests the dissolution not on emotional grounds, but based on what we believe to be undue influence exerted by Mrs. Alden upon his mother, Ms. Evelyn Alden. This resulted in a series of asset transfers, including full property ownership and healthcare proxy that would have traditionally remained within bloodline inheritance. Ruth stood calm and deliberate. We have notarized statements, audio recordings, legal documentation, and medical assessments verifying full mental capacity at the time these decisions were made. And Your Honor, we have a witness prepared to testify today. The judge looked over her bifocals. Bring her forward. Evelyn moved slowly but with intent. Her cane tapped softly against the floor, echoing in the near-empty courtroom. She sat at the stand, and when the clerk asked if she'd tell the truth, she didn't just say, "I do." She said, "I finally will." The room hushed. My son is many things, she began. But lately he's been dishonest, calculating. I ignored it for years. I thought grief had made him harsh, but grief does not plan betrayals. Clayton stiffened. When I was sick, Marissa came. She cleaned my house, cooked, reminded me I mattered. Clayton sent a woman, Brielle, who asked how many rooms my house had, who suggested I might enjoy less responsibility, who without my consent contacted a care facility. She looked up at the judge. I made those changes to my will and power of attorney because I feared what would happen to me if I didn't. Because the person I trusted to protect me stopped showing up. and the one who had every reason to leave stayed. Clayton whispered something to his lawyer. The young man looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Ruth returned to her feet. No further questions. The witness's full statement and supporting documentation have already been submitted. The judge nodded. Thank you, Ms. Alden. I looked at Evelyn. Her hands were folded, but her thumb trembled slightly. She had never spoken that much about her son in public. She hadn't needed to. Her silence had always protected him, until now. The judge turned to Clayton. Mr. Alden, unless you can present new evidence to contradict this testimony and the submitted documentation, the counterclaim for malicious interference is dismissed. Clayton stood. He looked smaller somehow. This is a witch hunt, he said. They ambushed me, manipulated her. She's old, she's confused. Evelyn stood again. I'm old, she said, not stupid. The judge banged the gavel. Mr. Alden, this court will not entertain character attacks in place of evidence. Sit down or be removed. He sat. 10 minutes later, the divorce was finalized. The counterclaim dissolved. The property was legally and publicly transferred to me. Evelyn's care was officially in my hands. And the man I had once built a life around lost everything he thought was owed. Outside, the wind had picked up. As we stepped into the parking lot, Clayton followed behind. He didn't say my name, just hissed. You think this is over? You made a public fool of me. I turned to him. No, you made you a fool. I just pressed play. He clenched his fists. You won't find better than me. I smiled. I already have. He stared as if waiting for me to say more, but I didn't owe him any more. Ruth guided me to this car. Evelyn followed behind, lifting her chin, as if the air had lightened, as if a stone had been pulled from her spine. Let's go home, she said, somewhere the wolves don't eat their own. That night, we gathered in her living room. Joel came. Greta brought pie. Sonia fell asleep on the couch with one arm draped over my leg, like I was already part of the furniture. No one said Clayton's name, but I saw the understanding in every glance. And when Evelyn raised her glass toward me, just a quiet gesture in firelight, I didn't toast to revenge. I toasted to return, to the woman I used to be, and the one I was just beginning to become. 1 year later, I wake up to the sound of laughter, not the forced kind, not the hollow, careful tones I used to hear echo off cold kitchen tiles. Real laughter. From the backyard, from Sonia chasing a red balloon across Evelyn's herb garden, from Joel chasing her with a plastic cup full of lemonade he's pretending not to spill. We live together now, not in a dramatic fairy tale sort of way, just easy, real. I rent the cottage behind Evelyn's place, turned it into a little studio and part-time therapy practice. She likes to say I saved her life. Truth is, she gave me one back. Clayton, he moved to Charlotte, started consulting again. I heard from Ruth that he tried to fight the deed transfer one more time, but the court dismissed it in under 5 minutes. Brielle gone, quietly, like smoke that realized the fire wasn't coming back. I don't miss either of them. Some nights when the air is cool and the porch lights flicker, Evelyn sits beside me and tells stories about her youth, about the men she didn't marry, the roads she didn't take, and how sometimes missing the wrong train is how you end up on the right path. I watch Sonia color sidewalk chalk stars beside our feet. I hold Joel's hand loosely in mine. And I realize I didn't just survive betrayal. I rebuilt from it, smarter, softer, stronger. Not out of vengeance, but clarity. If you've ever loved someone so much that you forgot to love yourself, this story is for you. And if you've ever walked away not because you wanted to, but because you finally had to, then tell me, what would you have done? Drop a comment if you've ever been forced to choose between peace and someone you once called home. We're listening.